are all written briefings. So we are going to jump right into item number 4, which is the interview process of the advice and consent for Director of Human Resources for Julio Garcia. So Julio, please join us at the table. And if you wouldn't mind starting out, introducing yourself, talk about where you're coming from, and for Salt Lake City, just give us a good idea of Julio Garcia and your credentials.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you. Is this on? Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. It's an honor to be before you. I do have maybe a 2 or 3 minute statement to provide a little bit of this information. As you've seen by my resume, I've been working for the last several years as Associate Director for Human Resources with Salt Lake County Government. The county has been a wonderful place to work, and I'm grateful for the more than 14 years that I have spent there. In 2008, I was given an opportunity to play a pivotal role in building an employees' university for county employees. This was modeled after a corporate university structure that is often found in the private sector, particularly in Fortune 500 companies. Essentially, corporate universities are designed to assist their organizations in achieving their goals by conducting activities that foster individual and organizational learning and development. Microsoft has a corporate university, Apple has one, Disney has a rather famous one. But this model was a new concept to county government, and I got to help build this employee-driven organization through a collaborative approach. And to make a long story short, it was ultimately this experience that led me to moving into the Department of Human Resources. As Associate Director of HR at the county, I continued my oversight role with Employees University, but I was also responsible for managing our classification and compensation staff, as well as our recruitment team and our HR Business Solutions unit. In all these areas, I was instrumental in bringing a fresh perspective and in offering new ideas for streamlining processes and in improving service delivery for our employees. I introduced a lot of new HR programs, which I'd love to talk with you about in greater detail at some point, but I've implemented things like an onboarding program for new employees at the county. I began the discussions in a pilot program on succession planning. I helped develop and implement a supervisor boot camp training, which has proven to be very effective. And I was also part of a committee that retooled our performance management systems at county government, along with the streamlined internship program and many other projects and programs. And it is through these types of programs and projects that I've worked on that I've really grown a love for HR. And because of my experience with these programs, it's created a lot of passion and enthusiasm. And I hope that I can align that experience and contribute that experience to the work that I might do here at the city. Leaders of organizations everywhere, and I think I had a conversation with Council Member Kitchen about this, that leaders of organizations everywhere will tell you that employees are their greatest assets. Well, HR gets the privilege of focusing on those most valuable assets. We get to focus on employees from the very beginning of their career all the way through to the end of their career with the city in this case. Basically, across the spectrum of their time with the organization, HR has a role. It starts early as they experience the application process with an organization. And we in HR should be making sure that applying for jobs is easy and accessible to everyone. HR's work should also ensure that we are offering competitive pay and that we provide equal pay for equal work. We're also responsible for administering valuable benefits programs that are critical for the health of our employees and their families. And we should be making sure that employees' rights are protected, that due process is in place, and that they are protected from harassment and discrimination in the workplace. HR's work, of course, also includes ongoing learning and development opportunities for employees. And finally, HR should have a role in providing employees with important information and resources to help them prepare for retirement. Clearly, there are many areas on this spectrum of an employee's career that HR can influence. Now, the reality is we don't always have the right policies in place or enough resources to make all of those things that I've just mentioned as great as we want them to be. But HR gets to focus on each of those stages of an employee's career. And if we do things right, we get to focus our efforts on making continuous improvements in those areas. That's why I love HR, and that's why I'm thrilled with the opportunity to serve the employees of Salt Lake City.
Thank you, Julio. And before I turn it over the questions to the council members, just to really appreciate you being here and your willingness to be interviewed at this time. So council members, I'm going to look to you for questions that you might have for Julio. Derek.
Thanks for being here, Julio. So my question is, do you see, you've been here for about a week now, so what's your assessment of current HR policies, and do you see any holes or deficiencies that might need to be addressed? And if you could, give us your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, let me start by saying that the HR team has been incredible. I was just saying to the mayor that I could not have asked for a better welcome by this team and other employees throughout the organization. They've been incredible, and with this sort of warm welcome, it's definitely feeling like home already. That being said, I've spent a lot of time in my first almost 7 days here, spending time and meeting one-on-one with members of the staff and hearing from them. And I think we're getting a lot of great ideas. I do see some areas for opportunity. I would like to look at our HR policies. I think it's time to revamp some of these HR policies. I think what's important to recognize about HR policies is that they are the rules of the game, so to speak, for employees. For those of you who watch the Super Bowl on Sunday, you see that the players on the field, they are playing off of a playbook. They know what the rules are in order to succeed. That's how I view HR policies. And I think it's time to dust them off, tweak some of them. You have some really great policies in place, by the way. There's a supervisor standards policy and a leadership policy that I'm in love with. I'm not sure how compliant we are with those policies, but I think you've got some really strong things in place now. But I have ideas on some improvements for HR policies. I also would like to see some improvements to our web presence. It's my understanding that a number of employees cannot access the HR website, the intranet, from home because they don't have a virtual or an account for the VPN system. And I think HR needs to be transparent. I think we need to share information and make it readily available to all employees. And I see a revamp of a website as maybe some low-hanging fruit. Work, to be sure, it's work, but I think that's something that we could have a lot of fun working on. And then I do see some opportunities with programs that we could develop, some programs that I mentioned earlier that I've worked on with onboarding for new employees, for example, or bringing succession planning conversations into the organization. If the city is like the county, which I suspect we are, we have about 1 out of every 4 employees who are likely eligible to retire today. And I think these are things that need to be addressed and efforts put behind them. So those are a couple of things that come to mind. Thank you.
Lisa.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. I have a bunch of questions,
Okay.
and some of them are scenarios and others are just questions. I think we can agree that right now morale in this building is pretty low, particularly amongst those who are appointed. As the HR director, what do you plan to do to help improve morale, particularly with those appointed employees who come to work every day not knowing if this is going to be the day the shoe drops and they're told to pack up their stuff? So what is your plan for addressing that?
Sure. Well, look, I get it. I think that it can be a very unsettling experience to be in an appointed position. I'm sitting in one temporarily right now, and I understand it is a very scary situation. I think communication is the antidote for most problems. And what I would commit to doing as HR director is working closely with the mayor's office to come up with a communication plan by which we would reach out to every employee who is appointed and give them an update, basically, so that they know where they are, they know what to expect. I think that is probably kind of an immediate need to reach out to those appointed employees. But on that communication front, I think it's also really important to devise other communication channels that we can use to communicate to employees on an ongoing basis. I do think we can get in front of this and improve the situation.
So would you commit to like a timeline so that people would know by a certain date whether or not they still have a job or not? Is that the kind of thing you'd be looking for?
Yes, absolutely. I think I would love to work with the mayor's office to establish a timeline by which we would reach out to every employee who is in an appointed position. And I think, again, I'd have to work with the mayor's office, but I think a 2-week timeline would be a reasonable thing to work towards.
Your predecessor in this job, prior to coming to HR for Salt Lake City, had managed a budget at the university that was $4.4 billion. What is the biggest budget you have ever managed?
Nowhere near $4.4 billion, but I have managed sizable budgets. The HR budget at the county was about $2.2 million for our operational budget, and we, until very recently, actually did not have our benefits budget rolled into the HR department.
And did you manage that directly as a deputy director?
Yeah, the director and I both were very involved in that budget. The other large budget that I managed was in the elections division, and it was about, I think, a $9 million budget.
All right, and now I have a few scenarios that I want you to answer. I'd love you to describe a time in the past when you succeeded in engaging leaders in other departments to improve the culture of their organizations. And then I'll have some follow-ups to that.
So when I have engaged leaders in other organizations.
In other departments to improve the culture of those organizations, if you have had an experience doing that.
Sure. No, I think the Employees University is a great example. So it's something that I am very proud to have been a part of. But it's not just for having built the organization. It is for the very reason that you've articulated. I think that the Employees University and bringing leaders from Salt Lake County around a table, we had department heads, we had elected officials, bringing them around the table and introducing this learning culture changed the culture of the organization. It provided opportunities to employees. It made them want to do better, and it engaged them in their work. I've had many, many instances, and this is probably among the most rewarding things I've experienced at the county, where I had employees approach me and say, hey, because of that certification program that we took through the Employees University, I was promoted into another job, into a better job. Or because of that class I took on how to write a business case, I put a proposal together, submitted it to my organization, and we've made a significant improvement. So I think bringing a board of trustees together for the Employees University would fall under an example where I've done that.
And how did you measure success with that?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's another area where I would like to bring some ideas into this organization. We did a lot of surveys at the county. As a matter of fact, I at one point started saying, okay, this might be survey overkill, but it's valuable. So we measured success by sending surveys out after every class that we offered. We measured success after new employees were brought into the organization to assess their onboarding experience. We also recently started with exit interviews for every employee who was willing to come in and talk to Human Resources about their experience and why they were leaving the organization. So we measured success basically by tracking survey data.
And what did you learn in that experience with the Employees University in terms of bringing people together?
What I learned is that a group of people is going to come up with a much better solution than I will by myself. And I think that collaborative approach has proven to be very useful. It's more time-consuming, for sure, but it's also, in my experience, always the better solution. You get the better outcome that way.
Okay, another scenario. Can you tell us about a time when you came in to lead an established team? Mm-hmm. Like you're coming in to an established team, you're the new leader. Tell us a little bit about that, and then I have some follow-up to that.
Sure.
Have you been in that situation? Because the university was brand new, but have you had that where you've come in?
Yeah, actually, I had it both when I came in as elections director and when I came into Human Resources as associate director. In both instances, there were established teams. And again, my approach is, and I said this to my new team here on Monday at our first all-staff meeting, my intent is not to come in here and rock the boat. I think we've got a lot of great ideas. And by the way, this team that I'm inheriting collectively has over 300 years of experience with Salt Lake City Corporation. 300 years with this group. So yeah, I'm coming in with the attitude that, look, I'm going to have some ideas, but I know you have a lot of ideas, and what I'm doing in my one-on-ones thus far is asking each person to come to me with their top 3 priorities for human resources. At a subsequent all-staff meeting, I'm going to list all of those priorities that people have shared, and as a team, we'll determine, along with, of course, the goals provided to us by the mayor's office and input that we get from this council, we will, as a team, determine which goals should be our priorities for our first year together.
When you came into elections, how did you engage those tenured members and build trust with them?
I think that's a great question. I think, especially with tenured members, I think and at that time I was a lot younger than I am today, but I think they look at you and they're like, okay, who's this young guy coming in? I think if you show people respect, it's a two-way street. You show respect, you'll earn respect. You show trust, you'll earn trust. It's about, back to I think your first question, it really boils down to communication. That's, my experience has proven that it boils down to communication and a two-way street with those relationships. And
when you worked at elections, what did you feel like you were able to achieve with the team that was there?
The elections, it's hard because I feel like every team I've ever left, I kind of left a part of my family. In elections, I learned a lot from this group. It was a fantastic opportunity, both the first time I came into elections and the second time. The second time it was to implement a federally mandated electronic voting system. That was something I was very unfamiliar with. We were all unfamiliar with what needed to be done. They were uncharted territories. However, again, that same principle applies. Salt Lake County was not alone in that implementation. It was a statewide implementation, and we worked very closely and collaboratively with other counties throughout the state. As a matter of fact, my old boss, Sherry Swenson, will tell you that Salt Lake County became probably the go-to organization for every other county in the state through our efforts in kind of charting a path through these uncharted waters. And so, yeah, I think, again, it goes back to that collaboration, and I've learned that through elections and HR.
As the top HR professional with the city, you will be required to plan for the future and assess risk and advise the mayor and the city council on workforce planning, on leadership development. You touched a little bit on that, on total compensation, including benefits, and on employee labor relations. Can you describe a past experience that you've had in each of those areas and how you measured success? So starting with workforce planning, have you had an experience in the past with that and how you measured success?
Okay, so workforce planning.
I'll give them to you one at a time.
Okay, so thank you. So with workforce planning, I think we, as a division director or associate director, you're doing that on a very regular basis, right? You're assessing your own organization. In HR, of course, we're trying to take that at a macro level and do that across the board. But to focus on the micro level for just a bit, with workforce planning, I think you have to look at all sorts of tools that will help engage your employees. One thing that I recently worked on was I bought a book for all of the folks on my team, a book that maybe many of you have read. It's called StrengthsFinder. And in that book, basically, you try to identify what you're innately good at, what your talents are. And as part of this workforce planning in my unit, I wanted to come up with projects that I could assign to people that they would succeed in because it would motivate them and engage them. And the office would succeed because you're going to have your best player in that area working on that project. So that's one example. But I also think it's really important with workforce planning to have ongoing feedback between managers and supervisors. Another area that I would like to look at here at the city is your performance management policy. It's my understanding that performance management or performance appraisals are not necessarily done across the board in this organization. And performance appraisals by themselves are not necessarily the end-all, be-all or the solution, but it's the dialogue that happens, that should be happening between employees and their supervisors. So, for example, I'm a big fan of quarterly conversations where you, as a supervisor, sit with your employees, look at the goals that you establish together early in the year, and measure progress on those goals each quarter. And I think with that feedback, I think it goes a long way in making sure that you're focused on the right things
So what would indicate with workforce planning that you've had success?
Well, I think with workforce planning within organizations, I think employees' performance, I think what you're able to achieve as an organization, if you're able to achieve some of your goals, or if you can't, I think a lot of times we'll get busy and say, oh, because we had these other unforeseen things come our way, we were unable to focus on, our initiatives or our projects. And sometimes that may be appropriate, but if it's year after year, there's probably a pattern. So I think you measure success by what you achieve, both in terms of projects and in terms of the engagement of your employees.
How about an example of leadership development and how you measured success with that?
Leadership development is one area where I will tell you I feel like I have some unfinished business at the county. The Employees University, we had a lot of great programs for our employees. From day one, we talked about wanting to have similar certificate programs that we had for supervisors and for managers. We wanted a similar certificate program for leaders in the organization. It's unfinished business because we just kind of started having these conversations with our partner up at the University of Utah, the Office of Continuing Education. So I think I have ideas on how to bring leadership development into Salt Lake City. Again, as I mentioned in my statement, sometimes it is an issue of resources. We never did get a budget increase at the Employees University. So we did a lot with a very little, and I believe I can continue to do a lot with a very little, but with some investment, I think we can do a lot of additional exciting things like leadership development.
Councilmember Adams?
Yes.
Are you okay if we go to Aaron for some questions, and then if there's...
Can we just finish up this one?
Yeah.
Okay, just, and yeah, absolutely, that's fine. And how about addressing an experience that you've had with dealing with employee labor relations and maybe EEO?
Mm-hmm. I don't have direct experience working with unions. At the county, we don't have unions. We have employee associations, and they're a little bit different. However, I have comfort in knowing that there's a great gentleman by the name of Brian Roberts who works for the city attorney's office, who I understand does the labor negotiations for the city. Brian and I are meeting, I believe, tomorrow or the next day, so that I can kind of get a lay of the land of what HR's role is here at the city with respect to labor relations. It is something that I'm very eager to work on. I have, in my 7 days here, reached out to the Salt Lake City Police Association and met with Mike Millard. And then with the International Fire Association, I met with Trevor Talon. I have a 6:30 a.m. breakfast meeting tomorrow with Dale Cox. And then I'm meeting with the final association folks at AFSCME in a week or two. So I recognize I've got some homework to do.
And have you had EEO experience?
Yes, at the county. So thank you. At the county, I did not supervise the EEO manager like I would here at the city, but I do have experience. We were on the same management team, and I did assist with several investigations. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mendenhall.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Julio, thank you for making yourself available for the small kind of meet and greets that I know a lot of us took advantage of last week. I had a great meeting with you and enjoyed your responses to the questions I asked you then. I won't repeat any of those, although I think it helped me to get to know you and your management style better. I think we will all get to know that after I think you'll be appointed. I want to say that I hope that you see, and I hope it's true, that you have 7 open doors in front of you for dialogue about policy opportunities that you see as you immerse yourself in Salt Lake City's current policies and meet with our employees and department directors. Surely you will see opportunities for that evolution that you've talked about, that HR and HR policy is, as with many other policies, an evolving condition. Our culture is evolving, and so are our employees, to be sure. We want to stay up to date with those changes and reflect the kind of equity and promise that we see in our employees. We have the best employees in the state here. We have over 3,000 of them. There are many. And frankly, the ones who we see the least are the ones that I think as residents we see the most. They're the people who dug up my main line last week, and they're the folks who pick up my garbage every week, and you get to know their faces, and they go out of their way to, get the lady down the street's garbage because she's too elderly to pull her can out, and they do it out of the goodness of their hearts. We have incredible employees, and I get a sense that you're aware of that. And so we look to you to bring to us opportunities for us to sharpen our skills and our ability to serve them as they serve our residents. And that's not a question, but it's a statement to you.
Well,
My only question
Yes.
would be that I didn't ask you last week when we met, but if you could talk a little bit about succession planning. You mentioned that and that you've worked on that, and I see that as an opportunity that we have in HR here to expand on, shall I say. Can you talk about that and whatever it is you know about what we do and where you could see us going to improve it?
Absolutely. Succession planning was a really fun project that I worked on at the county, and my lesson so far has been that no one solution fits all. We created, I knew that it was too big of a project and too important of a project to create a solution and roll it out countywide without first getting some experience. So I approached our department director, the director of our health department, and his associate director, and asked if they would be willing to pilot a succession planning project. And to say that they embraced it is a huge understatement. They loved it, and they were instrumental in really developing a plan that worked for the health department. This plan actually involved an application process. Well, let me back up. It first involved us identifying the demographics and the statistics in their department to assess how many employees were eligible to retire, both today and in the next 3 to 5 years. We started there. Then we used some tools. I hired an instructor from the University of Utah to come in, talk to us, give us some tools that we could use on identifying positions that are most critical to an organization and maybe at most risk for vulnerability for people leaving those jobs, right?
Outside of retirement.
Outside of retirement as well, yes. And so through some tools that we developed and customized for the health department, we identified, I think, 5 positions that they felt were most vulnerable to losing people in those positions, and they needed to deepen the bench. So they then decided that they wanted employees who would be very engaged and interested in this succession plan. So they created this application process. We created this application process together where employees applied for the program and had to be interviewed to be I think we called them mentees. Nobody ever liked that word, but we didn't come up with a better one. So we essentially had mentors and mentees. So these positions that were identified as critical, the people who were incumbents in those positions became mentors to the people who were admitted to the program.
What if they're unwilling?
Well, then you might have a performance issue at hand. It shouldn't always be a choice if it's a critical function to the organization. And luckily, we didn't face that. I think we would certainly find creative solutions if we did face that. At the health department, people very much embraced the idea. So we had a very extensive process with the health department. Now, that was, and again, I could go on for probably an hour on that project alone and how effective it's been and how succession planning really morphed also into an effective mentorship program. That model didn't necessarily fit the next folks that we talked to at Parks and Recreation or the folks at Aging and Adult Services. But together, working with them, we started creating customized solutions that better fit their needs based on their organizational vulnerabilities. It was a really fun project. Again, like our policies, it's evolving. It needs to be fluid. But it's something, as a matter of fact, I talked with a member of our team today in HR who's done a fair amount of research here at the city on succession planning as well. So it's definitely one of those things that I think will make it to our priority list in the first year.
And I'd love to have a follow-up meeting with you about this in particular and some of the history here at the city, but we'll leave that for another time. No, No, I didn't mean here.
Well, if I may say one other thing to your point about the 7 open doors for dialogue, I'm very grateful for that. I would really love to even come back to you on a regular basis and report out on progress that HR is making on various programs, whether it's an annual presentation, a biannual, or a quarterly, whatever would suit your needs. I'm very excited to have that opportunity to open that dialogue.
Thank you.
Councilmember Penfold.
Julio, thank you for your time to be here today. You mentioned in your opening comments equal pay. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience around equal pay and how you see using that experience here?
Yeah, it is an evolving project as well. At Salt Lake County, we, until very recently, didn't have enough survey data or enough tools, I think, to really assess where we were on competitive pay and on equal pay. So we tackled it through a couple of approaches. Number one, when an anomaly would come across our desks and we'd see, okay, like for example, if we were doing a classification review and we'd see that a particular employee who was female was making far less than a counterpart who was male, we would do some research. We would figure out whether, in fact, they did have varying degrees of experience or education that justified that difference in pay. If they didn't, if they were basically equal, we would go in and make recommendations for pay adjustments. That's one method where we did it on a case-by-case basis. More recently, and again, we're not there yet at the county, it's not a completed project, but more recently we were investing in some tools, some technology tools that would allow us to automate extracting data for employees, male and female, and time in position and other experience that they have. It's hard when you have 7,000 employees, 35, half of which are permanent, to have all of this in a database where you can pull it and automate it. You can have resumes, but it takes a lot of manual work if you can't automate it. And so it's a laborious process, but one that I think if we invest the right tools, it doesn't have to be as laborious, and it'll give us the information that we need to make better decisions.
And could you also talk a little bit about your experience surrounding sexual harassment, claims, investigation, whatever experience you have there?
Yes, as I mentioned to Councilmember Adams, I did not manage the portfolio of our employee relations at Salt Lake County, but I was very aware of the process and did participate in some investigations. And as a matter of fact, I think what's really important is to have metrics to measure, to assess what's happening in the organization, find out what kind of claims there are, what's being investigated, and what the outcomes are. And I think it's important to track those trends, not just on a department basis, but on a division basis, so you can start to identify some trends and then know where you need to focus your energies, maybe on some training, maybe on some, coaching. So, yeah, I think the experience is not as extensive as you might find with Melissa Green, for example, who is on our team and I think has years and years and years of experience doing just that.
When you did your training development, did you include sexual harassment as that component, or was it more of a specialized situation by situation?
It's both. At county government, we have a requirement that all employees have to complete sexual harassment prevention training every 2 years. In addition to that, all supervisors have to take the regular course as well as the supervisor course. I would certainly look at doing something similar here. In addition to that, pretty much every program that we developed, every certificate program or supervisor boot camp program or a new employee orientation training, they all included essential components about what the expectations are in the workplace around sexual harassment or harassment of any kind. And so we used it, infused it in all areas that we could.
Thank you.
Hey, Julio. Good to see you here.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Quick question about how will the public evaluate your success in the next 2 years?
How would the public evaluate my success? That's a good question. Well, I am a big believer in metrics. We're compiling a lot of data now. I would like to produce at some point an annual report of HR activities, and I would say that success should be measured both in terms of progress that's made with, say, harassment claims. To take that as an example, my hope is that we'll see the number of those claims be reduced. But I also would like to see the number of training hours that employees get increase significantly. I'd hope that promotional opportunities would increase. I would hope that additional HR programs would come into the fold in this organization and become part of our culture. I think it could be a wide array of things, many of which could be supported by metrics that we should be tracking.
Thanks.
Julio, I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for your thorough answering of all the questions today. Your preparation is truly remarkable, and I just want to say that I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Julio, my question is kind of like Derek's, but I want to know how you will measure your success as the Director of Human Resources in Salt Lake City.
I will measure myself certainly in part by the relationships that I'm able to foster and build both with the council and other department directors and employees at all levels in this organization. I mentioned to one of you in our meetings that that's one of the things that excited me most about this opportunity was to come in and be able to have those open channels of communication. I will measure success hopefully by the good relationships that I can build and establish, but also, as a follow-up to Councilman Johnston's question, also with the programs that I'm able to implement, with a lot of help, of course. But I think success can be measured in a lot of ways. In the world of HR, I think relationships will be paramount, and then what we achieve with program development will be a close second.
Thank you, Julio. And just so you know, we have you on item E1 tonight for new business. And it will not be across the hall. We're going to stay in here to make it nice and easy and smooth. So I appreciate you being here. That was well done. Thank you, council members, for being direct and asking the questions that I think the public deserves. So thank you, Julio.
Thank you all.
We're going to move on to item number 5, 2016 Council Priority for Economic Development. And we have Allison Rowland, who is the policy analyst, and Ben Ludke from council as well, who's a policy analyst.
Would you like me to begin?
Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the council will remember, because we talked about it last week, our understanding is that the council has chosen economic development as a priority project for 2016. And our impression as staff from the workshop that was held several weeks ago is that the economic development strategic plan is at the top of your agenda for something that you would like to see done in the short term rather than in the long term. And that seems to us to be a reasonable goal for a annual priority project, but of course we want to make sure we have a clear understanding of what the council intends for that. And I do also want to recognize that the administration is interested in doing a number of other changes to the administrative structure of economic development, and so we wanted to recognize that they too are working on similar issues. So we have a number of straw polls, which we would love to hear your opinions on, and of course additional discussion as you see fit.
So in regards to the straw poll, Allison, are you talking in specifically to the policy questions?
Yes.
1 through 4? So I feel comfortable moving forward with these straw polls, council members, if you're okay with it as well. Number 1 would be, would the council like to straw poll what success would look like for the council priority? It's been recommended that we be as specific as possible, and one of the examples is approve an economic development strategic plan. Would that be different than what we're talking about with an economic development master plan?
No, our understanding from the retreat was essentially that there was some confusion or some discomfort with the idea of calling this a master plan. And so the council's intent was to change them into a strategic plan, and that's something that you'll see a little further on when we talk about the third policy question. So we just want to make sure that you do intend to change that name to a strategic plan. And then, of course, there are other potential options, which would include things like providing adequate resources to the administration so that they can take care of specific issues that the council is interested in.
So, council members, would you like to have any discussion in regards to that? Calling it a strategic plan?
Mr. Chair, not about calling it that, but within that, I'm wondering if it would be useful to have a timetable for bringing in new business, that we could see really specifically what we're trying to accomplish in a specified start and period of time.
Would you like our thoughts on that, or? My thought is that there is a certain amount of danger in that just because exterior conditions, external economic conditions could affect that. But if that's one of many other, of a list of different metrics, then I think I wouldn't see a problem with that.
I would love to see that as just one of the many things we're looking at, recognizing you can't control for external factors, but knowing that we have this goal of trying to bring in new business during this time frame. Right. Thanks.
So, Allison, the way I look at it is there's, inside this policy question for number one, there's two different questions. Approve it, calling it a development strategic plan. And number two is provide adequate resources to enable the administration to do what we define, correct, as a policy?
As I think from staff's perspective, the idea was to give you several examples of possible straw polls. I think it's the council's choice which ones they would like to adopt.
Okay. So, council members, are you comfortable in approving this, not calling it a master plan, but calling it an economic development strategic plan?
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
Okay. So, just a quick straw poll, thumbs up with that. Okay.
And then would this be that for the council, this is for staff's purposes, would this be the metric by which you'd like to judge the staff's success in moving toward your economic development priority?
Absolutely. I think that's a great way
Okay.
to measure success.
Thank you.
Should we just go down the list here, Allison? Would that make it easier so you know exactly what we're doing?
I love it when you do that.
Okay. Number two, does the council wish to receive an update from administration on its plans for a new department of economic development, which is what the mayor spoke about in her State of the City? That is a unanimous thumbs up. Number three, given the variety of changes in recent months, would the council like to review the legislative intent adopted in September 2015, which asked the administration to prepare an economic development master plan, which has changed now to strategic plan, in the next 12 months. The complete text of this legislative intent is found in attachment A.
Mr. Chair, would we do that after being briefed by the administration on their? Great.
Yes.
Thanks.
All the councilmen, if you're in favor of that. That is unanimous, Allison.
Thank you.
And number four, would the council like to consider updating the philosophy statement that was adopted several years ago? A proposed new version for council review can be found in attachment B. And you know what, Allison, I have to commend whomever worked on this for attachment B. I really thought that was well thought out. It was well done. Does anybody have any discrepancies or would like to add to the attachment B?
Mr. Chair, one of the things that I agree. I mean, I think that the draft from attachment B looks really good. But what I'd like to do before we formally adopt something like this, I think it would make more sense to go through the process, hear what the administration is going to say, look at the plan that we implement, because I think there may be some things that would be included in this. So I think if we go ahead and adopt this now, we're going to probably want to change it once we do the work anyway. So I'd recommend that we just wait until
the economic
until we go through that. Yeah.
So attachment C, council members, if you look at that was what was adopted by a prior council.
I'm sorry, that's attachment B, isn't it?
B is the proposed council philosophy statement on economic development as of February 1.
Apologize.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
B.
Yeah, not C.
Yeah. On B, I was curious too, and we don't have to get into it now, but about the annexation opportunities. I don't think that's a discussion that this council had And I'm not sure that I want to include that.
No, I think it was all previous, and that's why I think, I just think approving something at this point is going to be premature since we haven't even had the discussion yet.
Absolutely.
So,
Stan?
And I'm wondering, Allison, if we can, I imagine that we're going to want to modify these as we gather more information about direction from our strategy. And so if you could help us track what feels like it's consistent and what might be missing based on how those conversations go, I think that would be a really good way to focus how we decide if we want to modify and how we might want to modify this. So is that something that's acceptable in your process?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
I would defer to my
Yeah,
boss.
so I think if we can kind of leave it open and fluid for now, and as we have that conversation, if you could sort of remind us that some things might work really well and other things might be in complete conflict with what we're talking about. Thanks.
One other thing, I lost my notes, but I think that number 8 on here, which was tracking city progress in this area and identifying,
Needs for improvement.
yeah, I just a note for us to follow up that when we get to the point where we have reassessed these values, perhaps, let's not forget Pamperlick and the data opportunities that we have there and make that connection between our vision and what we want to see in data.
And if I might add to that, I don't think when we did these philosophy statements, we spent a lot of time talking about what success might look like. But now we're at that strategy stage where I think it's all about what success might look like. So could you remind us as we go through this process that we need, that you need to be really comfortable that you understand what outcomes equal success. So if we're not clear about that, if you could remind us, because I think we all need that kind of reminder of saying this is what success looks like and this is how we're going to measure it going forward.
Well, and everyone's success on the council is going to be different. From at least a year now that we've been talking about economic development, some people's success is streamlining building services, some's recruitment, and I've heard others talk about that building a tech hub in Salt Lake City. So measured success is going to vary from council member to council member.
But I think we might want to have a discussion about what our big picture success looks like, which seems to me it should be something like increased economic development. Now, that means a lot of different things for different people, but there certainly are some measurables. Is it expanded tax base? Is it more jobs in the city? Is it, more housing unit? Is it sales tax boost? There are lots of ways we could measure that, but I think we need to have that measurement in our minds when we talk about our success.
Building permits through the city, it's just...
But not new growth. Could be. Probably won't be.
Does that help, Allison?
I think that's a great help.
Okay. Council members, anyone else want to touch on this?
I would like to say, looking at what was adopted in September 2015, it might be smart for us to revisit this as well as we go along because, for instance, incorporating a technology campus in the West Downtown and/or Granary District as important elements in the plan, I'd like to know more what that looks like or what we're intending to accomplish there. Because, that's my neighborhood, for instance. So, so that would be
I think we
important.
propose demolishing your housing
Yes.
and building a tech complex
find
right
him
there.
out
I think
there.
that's what it is. There. I'm pretty sure.
But yeah, also I would like to see more on housing. I think housing can be part of our economic development plan as well, and a way that we maybe measure success, affordable housing. And then I had one other. I looked through Utah Business Magazine. I think it was December 2015, and what I realized is that office lease rates in the suburbs are approaching the same rate as downtown. And so we might have an opportunity there to really do an aggressive marketing campaign, like a relocate to Salt Lake campaign of some sort, to really pull some businesses that exist already in the valley and put them downtown. So that's just one idea that came into my head while I was reviewing the notes. And so I think we have a lot of ways to measure success, and I'm looking forward to having that conversation.
Aaron, you look like you want to say something. Okay.
I'll just say that we absolutely should look into something like that, and we have economic opportunities here and incentives that are, may look the same from city to city, but are distinctly better here. I
Right.
like that idea.
Okay, Allison and Ben, hopefully that gives you good direction.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Charlie.
Couple, do one other thing. On attachment C, you mentioned, where is it? On 3C, expand the city's current relationship with EDCU. I'd also recommend adding Governor's Office of Economic Development. I mean, I think that is one, because they both have different incentives, they both have different focuses, and I think that GOED is a group that we really need to start working with in a different way. Well, we just need to start working with them because we haven't. So,
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to number 6. Yeah, we're back on time. Actually, we're ahead of schedule.
James?
Yes.
Allison, I just got my notes back. Do you mind if I just do one more?
Go for it.
Which is on page 118. I'm going there really fast. That is, which is under ideas we could explore. Do you want me to go through those right now, or okay. On item J, which is talking about tax rebates and other incentives for residents to relocate to the city. I didn't know what we meant about residents relocating, like were they here and they left and we want to bring them back? But I like the idea if we got specific about city employees. I would love to hear something in our fact-finding night about those possibilities.
You mean like police and fire? Having them live in the city?
Maybe. Others, too.
Right.
Well, I heard earlier, I think we heard earlier that West Valley City might have some incentives for
Housing.
if they locate in the city, so
Right.
that might be.
I'd love to see that in our fact-finding night. And it's, when I talk to the garbage guys and women and the public utilities folks, I always ask them, and when I go speak with our employee unions, I ask them where they live. And it seems by and large that they aren't living here. So anyway, in item J, I'd love to specify our employees. And then on item I have to read it so I remember. No, I'm sorry, it's L, leveraging the pending completion of the fiber. No, I'm sorry. I didn't get a chance to read through my notes. Apparently, I have the wrong link, but a new hand position about business node development. I don't know which one that was. Did you see that?
Right. It's,
Oh, it's under
4I.
4I. Okay. Wasn't that the one that Jessica Thiesing occupied, maybe? And she, in CED, is that what you said? She was, and that was our business node liaison position. And so I'm wondering if that is the same position, we're looking at moving it. I don't believe we ever hired back for her position. But we had projects in the works that kind of came to a screeching halt with her departure. And I'm curious about if there's a new vision for that position and if it's in a new area of CED or what. But we have a lot. And I think within the RDA, we have that emphasis going on right now that we want to focus equitably on the small areas as we do with our downtown area, but also with the council, it's a priority. So anyway, I want to be able to get in deeper into what that position might look like.
Great.
And if there's changes from the past. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me go back.
Allison, one more quick thing on this. Attachment C is updating small area plans and master plans. I know that'll take a long process, but there are small area plans that are outdated, which would help progress economic development.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 6, amendments to alcohol offenses. We have Russell Weeks, who's with council staff, and Margaret Plain, our wonderful city attorney. So Russell and Margaret, we're just going to let you take over and tell us what the problems are, how we're going to fix it, make sure everything is compliant in Salt Lake City.
You need a starter. I'm definitely deferring to Margaret on this issue.
All right. So thank you for entertaining this this afternoon. We view this as sort of a housekeeping cleanup that we're asking council to act on. It would incorporate by reference certain provisions in state code regarding alcohol offenses. It does not create any new offenses, so I want to make sure we're all on the same page about that. This isn't creating anything new. The fact is that in 2012 we did a large overhaul of the city's criminal ordinances. The exhibit listing all of the provisions we were repealing was 36 pages long. And at that time, we repealed a number of things like drinking and drunkenness in public places, misrepresenting age, so using a fake ID, people who are over 21 buying alcohol for minors, and provisions about underage drinking. So we repealed all of those because they were duplicative of what's in the state code. There's sort of an anomaly in the Alcohol Beverage Control Act that the city prosecutor believes it's in the city's best interest to have a local enabling ordinance. Belts and suspenders approach, really. So we're coming back and asking to just incorporate by reference what we're already prosecuting that's in the state code.
Margaret, is your sense that that state legislation is sufficient enough to cover all of the issues? I mean, that's kind of why we went this way, was we felt like it was all there and covered and appropriate for the issues we were seeing around the enforcement.
And we've looked back at the 36 pages of things that were repealed, and that's why I say this provision in the Alcohol Beverage Control Act seems to be an anomaly. And out of an abundance of caution, we're requesting putting this provision back, or incorporating these back in by reference.
Thanks.
Any other of these little laws that we might need to look at to see if there's other?
Well, like I say, we've looked back at a number of them. We haven't checked every single one. I think we're good. I mean, frankly, there are cities in Utah that have no criminal offenses in their municipal code, and what they do is incorporate by reference all of the criminal offenses in the state statute. And there's good reason to do that. I think we would be on solid footing if we wanted to do that. Again, there's this anomaly. There's discussions about getting a legislative fix if one is even needed. So this is just to make sure that we've got what we need for now.
Cindy.
Just that there are always things that can be improved in our ordinances, and there have been occasions in the past when planning has come to the council or building services and recommended kind of general cleanup of ordinances, and the attorney's office had done a big project on that. We also talked in the past about having someone look at our whole code and make it more user-friendly. So lots and lots of opportunity to clarify and improve the code.
And we have some ideas on that, too, that we hope will percolate up in the next couple months here. So.
Well, thank you, Margaret and Russell. Moving right along. Item number 7, parking and parking enforcement. So we have Allison Rowland, who's coming back up. Well, I load up.
And my apologies, I didn't quite finish the candy I was eating because you're that quick. So on parking issues, I want to point out that this was an active project for 2015, so chosen by the previous council, and also that throughout the staff report, I mentioned the administration. Typically, I'm referring to the previous mayor's office when I say that, and I tried to specify that, Transportation Division, parking enforcement, all the other sort of, those people remain in their place, but some of the information comes from the previous administration, so things may have changed in that interim. Essentially, this is a variety of parking issues that previous council members and current council members have expressed concerns about. Many of them, there are sort of two sides to this. One is the problems in 2013 and 2014 with the newly installed blue parking meter system. And then the other was in terms of how enforcement was being carried out by the person who was currently in charge of enforcement at the time. Both those things appear to have been remedied since then. There's a new electronic meter service vendor since 2014, and the parking enforcement unit has shifted in its approach. So those two big concerns that were part of the concern of many council members have actually seemed to have been alleviated since then. But there are sort of a grab bag of other parking concerns that are listed here. And so if the council would like to discuss its preferences on how to handle these, then we're all ears.
This is Councilmember Adams, one of her favorite topics. I know that. Parking. Does anybody want to start this off? You want us to go through the changes that you've identified here?
Sure.
Early meter operation. I know that that's been a complaint that people can't prepay if they're here before 8 o'clock a.m. So, Stan.
I have a couple of questions, Allison. Are you ready to launch into questions?
For sure. Go for it.
On the early operation, I know that there's been a modification. Does it mean that the pay starts at 7 a.m. or that you can put, because I know for a while there was some confusion because it wouldn't let you start. If you parked early, you had to go back and do them. But my understanding now is if you park early, it will actually start your time at the 8 o'clock time.
Exactly.
Is that right? Exactly. So you're not actually paying for any time before. Do we actually need to modify the ordinance to accommodate that? Because the hours are still the same for the charge.
Exactly. And so the question is really if you would wish to change it, but our understanding is as well that in practice this has been changed.
On number two, the concerns I've heard, and I'm thinking this is where you've addressed it, are from some of the residential neighborhoods over on 3rd East and 1st South, where there are some meters, but there's also, we have situations where there's some of those old apartment buildings, they don't have parking, and people are generally okay with saying I can park my vehicle here for the night, but there's this weirdness about how we have to charge and for the meter space, and if they don't get their timing right, their time expires, they have to move their car and all that kind of stuff. Is that what we're talking about in this area primarily?
Yes.
At one point, there was a conversation around just exploring an option for residents who live downtown and who don't have off-street parking accommodation to somehow figure out a fee, pass, something that would help cover them in that time frame. And I know there were concerns raised about challenges with enforcement around that, but did we ever explore, are you familiar if we explored that or if we looked at any options for that?
I am not familiar with it if it was. I do know that there's a possibility for resident parking permits.
We do have administration here that can come up to the table and talk about it.
Oh, good.
So Robin Hutchinson, our transportation director.
I ran all the way here because Margaret went too quickly.
And I only have one more question, so can I just throw it out there so you can address it when it's appropriate, and then I don't have to come back to it. And that was on the 48-hour residential parking. And at one point, we were at 72 hours. At some point, somewhere historically, we changed it to 48 hours. I noticed that one of the considerations is like just completely eliminating it. And so just pros, cons, what the challenges are around that would be really helpful.
And I'm sure Robin can elaborate more on that. I did want to mention that actually there was some discussion among council members, that would have been 2014, no, it was 2015, about whether the 48-hour rule of streets for storage should be completely eliminated. So that's why it shows up in there.
And I don't recall that conversation, but I do recall I've got a lot of complaints in my district around it. And so, because I have a lot of situations where people's only option is off-street, and if they go out of town for a weekend, their cars can get towed. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested in either at least understanding the rationale from reducing it from 72 to 48, or any concerns that parking enforcement or the administration might have around eliminating it entirely.
And my understanding was that it was never 72 hours, at least not in recent history.
It's been quite a while, if it ever was. But it was more than 48, but I don't know the history. But it's been a while. It's been a long time.
Do you want me to just hurry and say the reason that there's a limit at all? Or, okay. So there were a lot of complaints from residential areas, people who were using streets for storage, hence the name of the ordinance. And so what would happen is that someone would get their recreational vehicle or their regular vehicle and park it and leave it on the street for months or years. And that was very irritating to the people whose home it was parked in front of. So there wasn't as much problem if you were parking it in front of your own house, but there were lots and lots of situations where there was a car stored in front of other people's homes. We still get a lot of those complaints, and some people are frustrated with the 48 hours. Now we also get the complaints on the other side, which is you're encouraging me to use transit. Why would you then penalize me for keeping my car parked? So that's the balance. And so the 48 hours doesn't seem to be working for those folks. The 72 hours might help a little, but it wouldn't resolve the whole problem on that other side.
And I appreciate that there are some people who think that they own the parking spot in front of their house. My former neighbor is an example, who used to pull her car out from her garage in the morning and park it in front of her house, and then at night when she felt like all the neighbors had parked, she would put it back in her garage. She's gone, bless her heart, but it was pretty entertaining to watch. And then the other extreme is, somebody left for a cruise vacation, and my neighbor friend didn't recognize the car and called it in, and they came back from their cruise and their car had been towed. It was a matter of 7 days. So it feels like there's some balance that we should be able to strike there. So thank you, Cindy.
I think there are two questions that were asked that I might be helpful with, and I'll like to first just recognize every time we talk about parking, we introduce the many divisions and departments of the city that address the aspects of parking. And so I'm joined today by Lisa Schaefer and Rick Graham and Isaac Astro, who's sitting in on his first meeting today. I'm sure that the rest of my team is also running over here, trying to get here. I believe Scott Barros and Kevin Young will join us as well. I'm going to start with the residential parking permits for apartments. That's an area that in the Transportation Division we're seeing an uptick in the number of requests for this. We have apartment owners that are feeling more and more pinched by parking. The more we're adding residential units to the downtown, the more of a supply-demand problem we're having. We're not yet structured to issue residential parking permits for multifamily unit dwellings because we feel it will quickly overwhelm the curbside, and not everybody will be able to actually use their permits. It's something that we're looking at right now. We're looking at this in the larger context of how we treat parking permits in general. We feel there's some updating to do in our approach to it, and we're getting some early advice from our consultants that are working on this parking policy study on some first steps on how we do that. It is part of a larger issue that I think we will need to address on residential parking for both higher density areas as well as the neighborhoods that surround growing commercial areas that are feeling the burden and the pressure. The second issue, streets for storage.
So, Robin, before you move on to that second issue, I guess I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit. It seems to me that one of the challenges we face is we do have most of the initial concern was coming from apartment owners who don't have any off-street parking, and 300. Some of our east downtown, some of those older apartment buildings just can't accommodate any or very limited parking. So we're not necessarily talking about new construction and new projects. Although I think our parking requirements may be putting some pressure on off-street based on those. And so I think it's important that we figure out that distinction and also, again, that balance between in an urban environment, do we really want to accommodate every single car that might want to park there, or do we try to encourage other options? Yeah. How do you strike that with
So there is a distinction, but I'll tell you we're hearing both categories. The category of people who are already living downtown in an older building and it never had parking, and they feel they need more parking on the street. But we're also hearing from apartment owners and managers. I'm thinking of one on Capitol Hill right now. They have parking, and their residents feel that it isn't enough and they need more, and they're looking for more on-street parking. So we're seeing the request from both. We're trying to do everything we can right now. On Capitol Hill, we were able to adjust some of the time-limited parking to encourage the turnover so that there would be spaces, things that we think will help solve the issues before making a wholesale change on how we do residential parking permits. As far as discouraging people having cars, of course, there are city policies that over a long time have shifted the conversation more towards using parking as a tool to help limit the number of vehicles that are being stored either on our streets or in our garages. It is in any city, perhaps you've heard this too many times, in any city these are pressures that we will always have to manage and deal with. I am looking forward to having better tools to present back to you when we have a bit more guidance.
Well, it seems like, to me, the conversation is very similar to, do we design our streets for 8:30 to 9:30 peak demand, or do we design them for sort of normal daily use? Because we'd have lots of streets if everything was designed for an 8:30 to 9:30 demand. If we design our parking to accommodate every single person who ever wants to park, we'll have a lot of parking. And parking typically takes up, huge, it takes up a lot of square footage in an increasingly dense downtown. And
one of the things that we've asked for assistance with when we started working with this consultant is once and for all, let's understand the parking that we have today and how we're using it. And what we're starting to find is that we're actually not utilizing the parking we have today in the way that we could. There is going to be an increasing demand for parking as we load up downtown with people living and working and playing there. But how we accommodate that, well, we can be creative if we just sort of go back to what is our supply and are we smartly using that supply. I feel for these people who come. We just had an HOA from I forgot the name of the apartments on 2nd East, come to Transportation Advisory Board and just tell us stories of, I come home, I work a late shift, I'm a nurse, I can't find the parking. And, I feel for a lot of these residents who they really are committed to living downtown, and we just want to look for the best solutions possible to meet our city goals, but also help people to make the choice to live in the urban environment. There is a number 2. The streets for storage was the second question, and this is really kind of a binary answer, and I think Cindy said it really well, that there is a balance, and I think the complaints that come in are maybe equally vehicles are being left for too long, or why do I have to move my vehicle so frequently? And we spoke earlier today, our parking team, and thought that trying 72 hours was, why not try something? We can help you to see how it's going and monitor the complaints. Do they rise? Do they fall? And does the nature of the complaints change? So we've discussed it on our side and don't think it's necessarily something that's solvable, but could it be better? Possibly with the 72, and we'd be happy to monitor how that goes if you do decide to change it.
On that, have you seen in other cities a mechanism for people to, kind of like when I go out of town, I can tell the post office to hold my mail. Is there a mechanism in any other city where you could go out of town and put your license plate on the parking enforcement's register? I could see where you could get people who do that every Monday morning to get their car off of our ticket list, but is there anything like that you've seen?
I don't know the answer to that, and it would be a worthwhile question. I may have a team member that does know the answer. I'm going to turn around.
It could be rhetoric for now.
Yeah, we'd be happy to look into if that exists in other cities.
Could I mention something, Council Member? Speaking with the previous Parking Enforcement Unit Director, he told me that there's a little bit of difficulty for parking enforcement people communicating with DMV. In other words, DMV is responsible for your license plate. It's responsible for knowing the address where that license plate is registered, but those addresses often aren't updated, and parking enforcement doesn't always have, or rather does not have access to the DMV list. So you would have to, there would be some sort of practical difficulties, I think, that might have to be.
But anytime a vehicle's ticketed, the license plate is identified on the ticket itself. And if there was some kind of internal system that was independent of the DMV even, that when they put in that license plate, a notice comes up. It's just an idea.
We're happy to look in to see what common best practices are with respect to that.
Yeah, I'm not open to taking off all parking restrictions for on-street. At least for me, I'm not open to that. But I do hear from residents and even myself in the good weather times of the year that I might not drive my car for 4 or 5 days, and that's the reality. And I think as we look at adding the potential for density in our existing neighborhoods, parking is, of course, going to be an issue, but we want to make it livable. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Erin. How are you?
Great.
So Lisa Schaefer, work in public services and have recently taken over administration of the compliance department. Kind of to that point, I think, Council Member, we could look into a database situation that could track those types of things, but I don't think that it would be real feasible with our current technology.
Does that database start with an A and end with an A?
That's
a seller in the middle.
Yeah, that is one possibility. It would have to be a separate database from kind of the ticketing database in my mind, but I would be willing to look into it, and we would have to maintain it separately, which would make it a little bit difficult to provide. It would be similar, I would think, to the RPP database that we have to maintain, right? So the residential parking, where we have to update it manually. Do you know what I'm
I don't
saying?
want to make it cumbersome for our employees who do that. But to my peers on the council, I'm not going to NLC in March, but some of you are. And this could be, I would love if you came back with any parking ideas from other cities in this regard. I think as we go, I'm hoping to go to the planning conference in April. As we go out and talk to other cities outside of our state, let's see what we can come up with and
I'm
bring
interested
back.
in that as well. I think that we would love to look into expanding the possibilities, and probably it's a good time to kind of introduce Isaac to you. Isaac Astle is the new compliance director, and probably within the next few months we'll be coming forward with a plan that Isaac and I are working on to kind of change the philosophy behind our compliance enforcement in the city to be a more customer-friendly compliance enforcement philosophy. So do you want to say anything, Isaac, or just say hi? But we'll bring a we'll bring a plan forward that, and we're interested, and we want to study these kinds of things and see if there isn't a way that we can find a more customer service friendly way to, enforce the parking enforcement rules of our city.
Mr. Chair, who's the legislative sponsor on this? There isn't one at the top of our doc.
It was an active project for 2015, so it didn't have one.
Okay.
The priorities and projects didn't have a specific.
Couple of questions on the meter time limits. With the new meter system, are we able to tell what the utilization is for specific times?
We have certain capabilities with the new IPS meters. We can look at utilization in a couple of different ways. We have the data. We have to build some components of the data to make utilization. We ran kind of a first draft run in an effort to provide an update on the system to you, and we're in the process of refining how to best deliver back to really the parking team, the administration, the council, just a basic report, and utilization will be one of those measures.
Because one of the things that I'm interested in, you mentioned, in the staff report, mentions early meter operation, and one of the questions that I have, before I would be comfortable moving forward with something like that, is I'd like to know what the utilization is for 8 a.m. If we have a fairly low utilization on that, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense that we start charging at 7:30 or earlier.
Yeah, we're not.
We're not. Actually, all it does is let's say you have a meeting that starts at 7:30 and it goes till 9. We want people to have the ability to pay for the 8 to 9 hour. So the meter's functional at 7:30, so you can start making your payment, but you're not paying for the 7:30 to 8.
We're not looking at extending the...
No. We just want to make it possible for people to come to early meetings and pay starting at 7:30, but not be charged till 8 a.m. when it officially starts.
Great. So, to the utilization point, again, a couple of years ago, the council changed the time frame that we're charging. So it used to be that we'd stop at 6 p.m. We now charge up until 8 p.m. I'd be interested in seeing what the utilization is from 6 to 8 p.m. to see if, in fact, that decision still makes sense.
We've started pulling those numbers.
Okay.
We've been coming to you about every 6 months with just an update on how things are going. We're working on the next one now, and it includes, we anticipated you might ask that question, so it includes it will include the 6 to 8 time.
Okay.
Actually, all of the time frames.
All of them, perfect. And then on the dead end and cul-de-sac parking, I appreciate the work that is in this. I know that tends to be a fairly complicated issue. I know that with the fire marshal has been able to work with parking, over the past several months, I believe, and has identified some problematic areas and solutions to those problematic areas. So I just want to thank parking enforcement for, working with the fire marshal to alleviate some of those things. As we move forward, are there other areas that we may want to focus on? I mean, anything that's come up from cul-de-sac issues or dead-end street issues that you're aware of?
I don't know that there are any additional areas that have been identified in that discussion. I think one of the points that we want to make during this discussion is that any change to the to the ordinance that would allow vehicles to park closer than 5 feet would have kind of a trickle-down effect that we're concerned with. So we'd like to have further discussion about that before anything got formally adopted.
Okay.
Because there are areas in the city where that could be problematic and really could kind of trickle down into areas that we don't want to deal with. Okay.
And then one other question, Mr. Chair. ADA on-street parking spots. I appreciate the information that's in the report about those spots. Does parking enforcement have any ideas on whether or not we should be expanding those, if there are areas of the city, where we have more ADA parking, on-street parking spots than other areas, or, would it be worthwhile that we evaluate where those ADA locations are and look at either potentially increasing them or moving some of those spots around or opening up other areas. And then once we do that, I think one thing that would be helpful is if, we, on the parking website, we list where those spots are for anybody who is in need of using an ADA spot, because we have 107 spots, around the city, but people just don't know where they are, and I think it's tough to find them.
If I
So-
could,
I was going to say.
I'll jump in on this one.
This is a
sort of
perfect question
lives with us
Yeah.
a little bit more so than
Okay.
compliance. We work on ADA parking kind of on a very regular basis. Requests come into us really at all times of the year for evaluation of whether or not there are enough spaces, or maybe there's a particular need in a residential neighborhood for an ADA space. And we accommodate requests really almost all of the time when they come to us. We find a way to accommodate the request. And you'll find in some residential neighborhoods, we've actually signed just 2 signs that say this is an ADA stall now. So we really try and accommodate that need. We do have our ADA stalls mapped. We do have pretty good mapping of our parking, and I need to look and see if we've overlaid that or not. If we haven't, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
We've got a working map. It needs a little updating. It's on parkingslc.com, and we can list them there for sure.
Great, thank you.
Just a follow-up question on ADA parking. Do they get 2 hours of free parking if they have the proper?
They do.
Is there any need to extend that, maybe to 3 hours?
We would have some technology problems because our meters don't extend to 3. I think it would be difficult to do
Okay.
with the technology that we have today.
But can't they look it up and see that they've been there 2 hours and they see that there's a placard and extend it to 3 rather than writing a ticket?
I don't think the enforcement officer can extend it for them.
Right.
We could look at this.
Yeah,
We're
you would
doing
look
this on the
into it,
fly
yeah.
here, and I think we'd have some technological
Yeah.
issues with that, but
Right.
we, rather than answer you
Off the top of my head, I
definitively.
would say we'd probably have to manually mark, so we'd be going back to like a chalking on the
Yeah.
tire situation. So that's the technology.
Lisa, may I butt in on
Yeah,
that?
please. This is Isaac, everybody. Isaac Castle.
Nice to meet you, council members. On the enforcement side, the procedure we follow right now is just based off of what the ordinance is. We can change that to whatever you guys prefer. It would be a matter of putting in a policy and training the officers to let them know that we're going to make this change, and then that would expand the time, because they come through, chalk the vehicles or mark the license plates, and then come back a prescribed time later to see if those same vehicles are there, and that's when they give them a citation. So it would just be a matter of your direction on that.
Well, because
if
I
you
do
want 3
understand
hours or
that-
4 hours, it would just be dependent on requiring the officer to come back at an extended period of time.
Well, and in some cities, they give them 4 hours of parking.
They do.
So if you would look into that.
Yeah, we're happy to look into it. I think we're trying to answer questions
Okay.
without doing any of the analysis required to answer your questions. So we'll
Right.
take a look. Yeah.
Stan?
We also provide free parking for high-efficiency vehicles. Do we track that? Do we know?
We do.
So that would be helpful information as we come back on your reporting. I'd be really curious to see how our usage is going with high-efficiency vehicles and how they're using our parking.
Up. It's going up.
Yeah.
We record it. We are issuing out of the Transportation Division office more and more of these all of the time.
So, and I'm curious, partly because I know that we set those efficiency levels several years ago. So I wonder if we might want to review those or see what kind of impact it's having on our revenue side as well. So,
Sure.
Thanks.
Cindy?
One thing that we might want to do while this conversation is fresh is look for a way to document how it is that the administration and the council have agreed to handle the cul-de-sac and dead-end parking. It's not really conducive to putting into an ordinance, but what we found previously is that there had been an identical agreement to this. But what happened is we had a new administrator, not this new administrator, but a previous new administrator who just disagreed and chose to exercise the administrative discretion to disregard the previous agreement. So while all of the people are still in the conversation, we might want to think about if there's a way we could work with the attorney's office to maybe document a protocol or something that could be more formally recorded than what we had before, which was a letter to some of the occupants of these residential structures. So.
And then I just had 2 remaining questions, unless somebody else wanted to jump in. The first one is the app. I really like the app, the smart app, except it robs me every time. I open it up, and before I even push, except for 2 hours, it's already started my countdown. So if it takes me 3 minutes to go through the process of inputting the data, I was robbed 3 minutes of parking. So to me, I just feel like that's just.
But you like it otherwise.
Otherwise, it's great. It works well.
You can walk to your destination while you're doing.
Council member, we have a really great relationship with Passport, and when we've brought minor issues or major issues to them, they've usually found a way to.
Don't charge me until I agree
so
on that transaction.
I'm happy to bring this to them to see if there's something in their programming that could address it. They've been extremely responsive on really all of our requests.
And then the second one is, if you look at the charts that you've done, the pay station revenue looks like it's gone up $60,000 in June. How does that relate to our fees and fines in our I want to call them meter maids. What do you call them? What's the polite way?
Compliance officers.
The enforcement officers going around. How have those fines, has it gone up? Has it gone down?
Are you talking about ticket revenue versus meter revenue? I think that our finance group is looking at that, and they're trying to compile that data. So we do have the data from IPS that shows the utilization. We show revenue at the meter. We show revenue from the phone app. And then we're bumping that against ticket data and collection data.
So I know that the enforcing has changed. What exactly have we changed in the enforcement?
Well, right now, I'll tell you frankly. I've been on the case since October, so I'm really green. Isaac is greener than I am. But what we've changed in the enforcement is an overall approach to enforcement that does not focus on ticket numbers as much as writing good tickets. So it's just been, kind of a coaching and mentoring approach to, it's just a different philosophy. And as we roll this out and as we mature in this and we're formalizing our plan that we'll bring to you in the July timeframe, that's our self-imposed deadline. We'll give you more concrete plans on how we're going to roll this out. But I will tell you right now, what we're doing is trying to help our compliance officers understand that there's a bracketed, amount of leeway within every ordinance. So here are your guidelines, and you have discretion within those. And so the focus is on writing good tickets instead of a lot of tickets. And we've seen some good results.
Can you understand what's the difference between a good and a bad ticket? Because to me, a ticket is when your time expires.
Yeah, it's a really, really touchy and terrible subject that I'm learning a lot about. So it's, I don't know, Isaac, what's the difference between a good ticket?
The example of what Lisa's talking about, the number of tickets written, there was this pressure of you should write this many tickets a day to show that you're productive. A bad ticket, for example, is an officer that comes up, pulls out their tape measure and measures that your car's 4 feet 11 inches from the curb, or not from the curb, but from the driveway, rather than saying that's about 5 feet, leave them alone. In the past, when their focus was, I've only got 34 tickets today, I need to have 35, they're looking for that issue. We're focusing on retraining them, explaining to them that our focus is on customer interactions. We're recording everything now as far as how many complaints come in by phone, which officers are responding to those. We're also looking at the technology to implement ways for them to say, okay, I was with a customer for 5 minutes here and 20 minutes here, explaining how to get across the town or across the city or where a specific office may be, because they do a lot of that, and that hasn't been measured or reported in the past. So it's those types of things. So that ticket, another one may be, oh, I remember that there was a vehicle around the corner that's booted. Technically, if I get over there within 5 minutes, we can have that vehicle impounded rather than just booted because they haven't technically met their 24-hour notice, rather than giving them 25 or 26 hours.
I'll tell you, a bad ticket is when you get a ticket for parking 19 inches from the curb when the gutter's missing and there's actually about a 8-inch hole there, and in order to avoid it, you had to park out. But I had a constituent got a ticket. Clearly, a challenging situation where it would have made sense for some accommodation.
Right. So just kind of refocusing. What's that?
Have complaints gone down?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a dramatic decrease in our complaints, and hopefully you're experiencing that as well. We'll show you some of those metrics. Customer complaints is one of the things that we definitely want to report on regularly to you.
And just to follow up, your initial question was a little bit more focused on revenue numbers, and we don't have an update for you today. But what is included here is an example of the updates we've been providing, and you can expect similar information but updated soon, and it will address that question a little better than we could today.
Mr. Chair, I was really interested in receiving the staff report and all the data that was in it, and I think it's really encouraging. The complaints are down so dramatically. I think it says that we have responded appropriately. Your department's done a great job in finding a better app and making it work better. There's still people of a certain age who will never, ever want to use our parking, but some of those will also probably have a handicap parking spot, so that will help them out. So, but I'm impressed with that. One thing in the staff report that I would love to have seen a picture of is the example of parking in aprons. I'm trying to visualize where those are so that I could see that for further conversation, and also farther down for future discussion, talking about doing some funding to invite people back to try our parking. And I spoke with Jason Mathis about that, and I think the Downtown Alliance might be willing to help with that, and we could run really hilarious ads. That I used to do advertising. I can think of great ads. When I'm running, I think of stuff that would make people laugh. That I wouldn't pay $5 million to have it in Super Bowl, but they'd be good. Anyway, so I hope we flag those.
Stan.
Thanks.
And we did it, and when we did the first changeovers, we did contract with the Downtown Alliance for how to use those meters. We've done some evaluations of where we can track now where meters are used, utilization. And I know last time we talked about this, some of the East Downtown locations were not highly utilized at all. We were having a conversation about shifting some of those meters over to areas where there's 2-hour parking, but it's never available, where there's no charges. Have we started that process?
We've done step one of that, in fact, is finished. And that is that we've looked at, so the new meters are able to provide us with data we never had before. So we are able to have a much clearer picture of what's happening with the parking where there's meters. And what we found is there are some areas where the utilization was so low that it actually did not make any sense to have that as paid parking. So we shrunk the footprint of paid parking just a little bit because we found that in a couple of areas the revenue didn't justify the payments on the machine. So there was a good cost benefit to the city for doing that, and we've since changed a couple of areas to 2-hour parking. We have started talking about reestablishing or establishing some newer areas for parking, but as you can imagine, that's a discussion that requires more care And we're treading very carefully into that discussion because it does impact people in a really different way.
And do you have the ability to evaluate where, and I won't tell you where my favorite my 2-hour parking spot is that really should be metered, but it's not.
But you probably already know.
Yeah, you probably already do. Mary knows where it is. Where's Mary? Is she here? She knows
I definitely
you know exactly where it is. But do you have a mechanism for evaluating that, where there are parts of the city where clearly the 2-hour is always full?
We absolutely do, and they're called human bodies. We have the ability to send our traffic technicians out to do manual counts when we need it. And that's going to be necessary. We've done some. We need to do more. That will be necessary when we go to, well, if we explore adding paid parking in certain areas. It requires on-the-ground analysis.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Hopefully that gives you a lot of information to move forward with. Is there more, Allison?
I am just wondering if the chair is interested in straw polling any of these items, particularly
The very first three?
The first three.
Yeah, and for me, Allison, I feel like we've had a lot of conversation on this. I'd rather prefer to have a parking night where we move forward with a lot of information at that point in time,
Excellent.
if that's okay.
Excellent.
That way, all the questions are answered all at once, and we're not coming back, if that's all right.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
We are going to move on to item number 8, which is the 2016 state legislative session. But before Lynn stands up, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. And I want staff to know that this was my favorite staff report that we received. Well, there's nothing on it, so it was great. No, it just, yeah, it's great. So we'll come back at 5:50. And David. Calling Lynn and David. Huh? Come on, David. Grab Lynn by the hand and pull him over here. Somebody's hungry.
Lynn Pace.
Lynn, come
Lynn
on.
Pace. Lynn and David, you are the
Lynn.
only thing between us and dinner, so I want you to keep that in mind.
All's good. We can be remarkably brief.
Okay. We have Lynn Pace and David Litvak from the administration here to talk legislative information.
Yes, it is a pleasure to be with you, as always, talk about one of our favorite subjects. I think, well, as usual, if you have questions, just interrupt us. But I'm going to let David start first by giving you an update on the discussion or on the dialogue about the request for funding for homeless shelters and facilities, and then we'll sort of work from there. But I think that's the first item we'd like to talk about.
Right. So we are continuing to work with Representative Gibson in Salt Lake County on drafting the legislation. So as I mentioned last week, the approach that we have taken is to have the legislative ask the appropriation request as a part of a broader homelessness reform initiative. That legislation is being drafted. We're actually meeting again with the stakeholders to continue the 14 outcomes that are a part of the collective impact process in reforming the homelessness services system will be incorporated into the legislation. I'm also working internally with city staff and in discussions with Salt Lake County to address the council's concerns in terms of what is realistic in terms of what we can do in year one. Year one being fiscal year. So July, the state fiscal year. So starting July 1, whatever funding is appropriated will become available, and making sure that we are giving clear indications to the legislature of what we can accomplish within that first year, benchmarks, timeline, and including some funding benchmarks. And so we'll continue to work with that through staff. We want to be very careful, one, that we're being realistic in what funding we need for year one, and this is just from the standpoint of one of the first facilities being in Salt Lake City, single men, single women. So having that conversation incorporated as a part of the site location conversation. And we also need to be very respectful to the funding dynamics at the legislature, that there's not a lot of funding available, and so we don't want to set up an expectation of and not meet it that first year. As I mentioned last week, the ask continues to be $27 million overall. The Representative Gibson is looking at breaking that ask up over 3 years. So, any questions on homelessness?
No, I was going to say only about 100, but with the nature of the session and things changing as they do and evolving, I appreciate the direction you two are taking, and we'll wait and see.
Thank you.
Yes, I will just add that given the nature of this session, there are a lot of groups out there with very worthy causes far beyond the available funds. And so the resolution of this issue, even if we are all in agreement, and I think there is increasing unanimity in the message, this won't be resolved until the last few days of the session, when they have to make hard decisions about which projects they can and cannot fund.
Is it accurate? The sense for me is that this is going pretty well. That the support that the leadership seems to be really engaged and are speaking a language of being supportive anyway. So.
Yeah, House leadership is very actively engaged. Representative Gibson, in leadership, Majority Whip, is leading this at the request of the Speaker, and we have started to reach out to Senate leadership, and they too have been very receptive.
So there was a request to have us report on significant progress on site selection in August. Is that correct?
That's part of the conversation. We're looking at August, October timeframe. That's part of the conversation in terms of what are the realistic expectations that we can set. What we are focusing on is having a public process ready to go as quickly after the session. I hope to take Friday off after the session, but we'll see. So we won't start that day. But we want to be quick and fast in terms of creating that public process and already having that conversation. The Site Selection Commission that preceded this particular administration is something that all of us need to learn a little bit more about. I know the council has not received a briefing on that. I just received a briefing on that today, and that's just because staff has been hounding me since day one to do that. And there was a lot of progress made, a lot of public participation, so I think we're going to be starting from a very good point moving forward.
James, do you think maybe we can get a briefing from...
We are going to work with council leadership to get a briefing on the calendar.
Yeah, we'll get it scheduled.
Okay.
Can I say that I want us to be clear and maybe change the way we're talking about the public process, that we aren't starting a public process after the legislative session. We are picking up on what was about a year of public process through the Site Evaluation Commission. We aren't starting new. And then when we get to that point, we really need to be clear about what the public process is going to inform, that we are not going to be pitting neighborhood against neighborhood to vote where we should put a shelter or housing, that we really need to start to get clear about that with the public, because that would be toxic, and that actually wouldn't result necessarily in the best services or situation for the homeless people we want to serve. So I want us to start getting clear about that, even though we aren't going to begin that discussion just yet.
Absolutely.
Okay, a couple of other issues we wanted to bring to your attention. You recall we had a discussion last week about historic districts. We've had a discussion most of the week about historic districts, and the dialogue is continuing as recently as this afternoon, back and forth. I think we've made some significant progress, but we're not there yet. So with your indulgence, I think I'll forbear on saying where we are until we know more, just because right now we're sort of in flux. But we have, I think, made some good progress and hope to have more feedback for you shortly on where that will go. A couple of other things that we haven't raised before. There's a number of retirement bills before the legislature, and for those of you that were around back when the recession hit, there was almost overnight a huge gap between the obligations that the state retirement system was required to pay out to retirees and the amount of funds available to, or the performance of the fund to meet those needs. So the state went through a very difficult process of scaling back their retirement commitments to not every existing employee was grandfathered, but any new employee was offered a different retirement package. So there was Tier 1 employees and Tier 2 employees. Now, with the benefit of a few years, they've noticed some problems with that, particularly among school teachers, and particularly in rural areas and some lower income or schools, and also in public safety, particularly in police more than fire. And so the legislature is coming back to revisit that and to say, well, maybe since things have recovered a bit, maybe we should adjust some of those changes to create a slightly enhanced retirement package and a greater range of retirement options for educators and public safety officials. The challenge with all of that, of course, is that any way you adjust the system has a significant fiscal impact on the city. So there are probably, maybe 10 bills dealing with retirement issues. We have tried to wrestle with that and anticipate what impact those would have on the city. There are 3 in particular that we are very concerned about in terms of the impact they would have on Salt Lake City. And one of those, I think everybody agrees, would be a very challenging bill, and that is basically to take all of the Tier 2 employees and make them Tier 1 employees. Well, that's a huge shift, and everyone seems to recognize that would be very difficult to tackle. But there are 2 others that would have a significant impact on Salt Lake City that we think has not been recognized by the League and other groups out there. And so our task today, after visiting with the legislative subcommittee, is to highlight the fiscal impact that those bills would have on Salt Lake City, and we think other similarly situated employers, to highlight the concerns we have and to get those addressed or to get them to slow down on those 2 bills. So you just need to know there's 3 retirement bills that are of concern to us among that group, and you may hear more about that.
And can I just clarify on the Tier 2, Tier 1 bills, not to take Tier 2 and make them part of Tier 1. It's just to try and equalize some of the benefits, the inequities in the benefit packages between the 2. But that does come at a significant cost.
So, another item I wanted to bring to your attention that I think we have mentioned early on is that we are seeking funding in an appropriation for what we're calling the Last Bridge project, which is the Jordan River Bridge, the Jordan River Trail, the bridge on that trail. And the last segment of that trail that needs to be completed is between 2nd South and North Temple in Salt Lake City, because there's a whole bunch of rail tracks that have to be crossed, and the only way to do that is to bridge them all. The cost of that bridge is approximately, put my glasses on here, $6.6 million. The county, city, and other entities, private entities, have raised $5.3. We're asking the legislature to help us with the last portion of that funding, which is about $1.2 million, $1.3 million. We have some significant support, but we recognize that there are many competing demands, as I just mentioned. But this item comes up tomorrow in appropriations, and we have identified this as, aside from the homeless project, obviously, as a top priority. If this trail is completed, it will be the last segment in what will be about 112 miles of continuous trailway from Provo to Roy. And we think that's something that we are certainly proud of, and something that certainly merits the effort to pardon the pun, bridge that last gap. So,
Lynn,
any questions about that? Yes.
Who made that?
This was put together, I think, by the Jordan River Commission. If you'd like copies, I can certainly get them for you.
Yeah,
but
I would like
if you have conversations with legislators, this is certainly a high priority to try and get that trail finished.
This is the last, this is like a missing piece for the Jordan River Trail, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And it's about 1 mile.
Yeah, well, it's about 3 blocks. Yeah.
Is there a name for this? Is this the Folsom Bridge? Or?
No. They're calling it the Last Bridge Project, meaning emphasis on the last.
And the city came up with most of that money, but not all of it. There's a couple of partners in there, but
right.
the city
Some
came up with most of
county
the
bonding money.
Yeah.
And none from UP.
Not yet. We remain hopeful, but but we're not waiting, hoping for railroad money. We're hoping the legislature can help us with that. Let's see. There was one other. Air quality bills. There's a number of air quality bills. We had a good visit with Representative Wilson about a couple of things. One, he has a bill that will address the building code adoption and moving from the 3-year cycle to a 6-year cycle. The good news is, as part of his bill, he is going to, in that bill, adopt the current codes. I forget there's different codes, so I'm not saying this right, but there is an effort in that bill to come current with what the Code Commission has recommended for adoption. And in addition to that, he is very committed, and he has told us that the Speaker of the House is very committed to the goal that was stated by the Speaker in his initial remarks beginning of the session to achieve an improved air quality so that we have no red air days. And he said that is the bold aspiration. He says we have no idea how we're going to achieve it, but he said we are committed to that. We want to make that an aspiration for House leadership, and they're committed to explore how to achieve that. And they are engaging in a really, I think, exciting dialogue with a lot of community leaders, business leaders, to identify not just the low-hanging fruit and the easy stuff that we've already done or that we can do that doesn't really have a meaningful impact, but to identify things that would really have a meaningfully move the needle in terms of air quality. But he wanted us to know that they are committed to that and that they appreciate the city's support and the city's attention, and we expressed obviously our support for that dialogue as well. Was there anything I missed in that?
Did they mention any Tier 3 fuel incentives for production locally?
The two pieces that I'm aware of on Tier 3 are, one, making some adjustments to last year's bill, which was the incentive piece. And then another bill this year that is being run by Representative Ward that would impose a reporting requirement on refineries so that I don't know if it's annual, but on a regular basis, they would come back and report to the legislature on their progress in moving toward Tier 3. But there's not a lot we can do in terms of mandates.
There is another some legislation that just came out, and I can't remember the number. It's a Senate bill to try and make the incentives for Tier 3 with the refineries more effective and more impactful. I will get that information.
I think that was
to you.
Senator Okerlund's bill from last year.
Yeah, and I can't remember if he's running it this year or someone else, but I just saw that the other day, and so I will get that information to you. So,
questions, suggestions? Okay. Those are some of the highlights. There's obviously lots and lots more, but I thought those were sort of the top ticket items tonight, unless you have questions. Or the new growth. Okay, yes. One of the things we have looked at, one of our priority items for several years was this new growth element in two contexts. One was year over year, from one year to the next, how is the certified tax rate determined for property tax, and are we getting full credit for the amount of new development that is occurring within the city? The other context was in the RDA context. When an RDA district sunsets like Sugar House, are we and the other taxing entities receiving credit for the amount of new development that has occurred within the RDA project area? That's being addressed, well, in two bills. There's an RDA bill that was a task force bill sponsored by Senator Harper and Representative Handy. That bill has been carefully drafted, and now it's taking forever to get the bill released because the legislative research. So the bill has not been released yet. The other bill is House Bill 25, sponsored by Dan McKay, and we initially had some concerns about how that was drafted and whether or not it was actually going to accomplish what we hoped. Last week we spent about an hour, several of us spent about an hour with Jennifer Conde from the State Tax Commission. She is the expert on new growth. She walked us through it, and we all came away actually very pleased and excited about what that bill does. So we are hopeful that that bill, which is already, I think it's already passed the House, or it's on the House floor. We're hopeful that that bill will move us in the direction that we've been trying to accomplish for several years. So that's good news. Other questions or concerns? Anything
The bill I mentioned, Councilwoman, is Senate Bill 102.
Thank you.
Can you tell me or tell us the prison relocation? Any movement on that? I'm sorry, I don't know how to frame that question.
The prison relocation is not, at this stage, it has sort of moved from the legislative arena more to the administrative side. So the Division of Facilities Construction Management folks and UDOT and others are working on sort of how it would work and gathering a lot of information. That dialogue is proceeding. I think it's proceeding well in terms of how we would hope it would play out in terms of location, utilities, roads, infrastructure, those types of things. And the legislative leadership has been very supportive on those elements. The last meeting, they made it clear that the governor reserves the right to make the final decision on location and all these details. So they're basically assembling a lot of facts that they are sharing with legislative leadership, but also with the governor. And they've told us that they anticipate the governor will make that final decision, this location, now go build it, in May of this year. And once that decision is made, then they'll start moving dirt and working on utilities and actually start the project, as it were.
And one other question is the Fair Park. Any movement on?
Yes.
Yes, very positive movement.
Right. The good news is that the legislature has, or at least the subcommittee that's been working on this, has determined unanimously that the state fair ought to remain at the historic fairgrounds in Salt Lake City. And having made that decision, they're now working on legislation to get essentially a full vote of the legislature. And that legislation will involve some restructuring of the board so that there will, and Salt Lake City will have a representative on the board appointed by the mayor. It's intended to be a representative of the community, the Fair Park community. So that we get a voice on the board. They will draw a map of all of the state-owned property in the area and create almost sort of an enterprise zone so that whatever happens on any of the property, if the white ball field gets developed or whatever it is, all of the revenues from those properties go back into the fair and the Fair Park.
Great.
They're also looking at ways to acquire some additional property, including maybe some pieces of county and city property along the Jordan River that would enhance the access and staging areas for some of the events. But all of that dialogue is headed in a very positive direction. And we have encouraged legislative leadership and the sponsors, and they have agreed that this is the year to get this done, settled, and to move forward with a renewed level of support from the state for the Fair Park and the fair.
But it's settled that somebody from the community will be appointed by the mayor and serve on that board?
Well, assuming the bill passes,
assuming,
yes.
Okay. All right.
Landon, follow up with that. Are they still looking at not doing a lease, or are they looking towards a lease?
What they have told me is that there was a lot of friction about, because the old model was that the state would lease the property to this board for a period of years, and the board then had exclusive control. And for a long time, the board was asking for a renewed lease for decades as a confirmation that the fair was going to stay. The legislative leadership struggled with that, but the resolution they've come to is they essentially want to turn over authority to the authority to deal with the property to this board. There won't be a lease. They will simply give them authority with the understanding that they would then market the property, go out and market the space. And if they need authority for anything more than 10 years, they have to come back and get legislative approval. So they're not worrying about a global lease and a sublease. So the good news is that that point of friction has really gone away, and they have reaffirmed their commitment to keep the fair without the need to worry about the terms of the lease or that sort of thing. Any other questions? Well, seeing we have outlasted your interest, I think we'll move on, but thank you for your support. As always, if you have questions or things come up, please let us know. In the meantime, we'll try to keep you informed as things unfold.
Thank you.
You bet.
Crickets. Crickets, crickets.
We will break for dinner and come back here at 7 o'clock. Sorry.
I'm going to try to.
And dinner is in on the liaisons table back in the office.
I'll get back.
Okay.
Have comments tonight, and we're going to go directly to E, new business, which we will consider the following items. Number 1, which is Director of Human Resources appointment, Julio Garcia, as well as number 2, amendments to alcohol offenses. So I am looking for a motion in regards to these 2 items.
We're getting there.
We ready?
Yeah, go for it, Andrew. Do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve Julio Garcia as Director of Human Resources.
So
I'll
we need to
second.
suspend the rules first and then approve them.
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules. Will they be together?
Yep, so they are now, right?
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
So
let me rephrase my motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve Julio Garcia as Director of Human Resources, and remind me of the second one.
suspend the rules.
Suspend the rules to,
Julio's appointment.
all right, for Julio's appointment.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion has been made by Councilmember Johnston and second by Councilmember Kitchen to suspend the rules and approve Julio Garcia as Director of Human Resources. Is there any discussion in this before we move forward?
I'd like to say that Julio, I think he'll be great in the position, so congratulations from my part. Maybe that was a little preemptive, but
Did you say something about his hair?
I told him congrats, but
Did you say something about his hair? Because everyone in the room, I think, is jealous of your hair, Julio.
especially me.
Great. So we are going to move on this then. All those in favor? Aye. And that passes unanimous. Congratulations, Julio. I'll look for a motion for E2, amendments to the alcohol offenses.
Mr. Chair, I move that we suspend the rules and adopt the amendments.
There has been a motion made by Councilmember Penfold and second by Councilmember Luke. Is there any discussion in regards to this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries forth. We're going to move on. There's no unfinished business on item F. So
Mr. Chair, I move
Is that
the
really
consent
true?
agenda.
There's no unfinished business anywhere in the
Well,
world?
there is, but not
Okay.
currently on the agenda. So we're going to move on to item G, which is our consent.
Mr. Chair, I move the consent agenda.
Second.
A motion's been made by Councilmember Luke and second by Councilmember Penfold to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. So we're moving on to, do you want to do announcements before adjournment, of course?
We could, if that's all right.
Yeah, great.
Just very quickly. Two very quick things. There's a group from Ukraine coming in on Thursday, the 25th at 4 p.m. They are professionals who are studying government, local government in particular. They have been in contact with Councilmember Adams, but she is not available at that time. So we wanted to see if there is a council member who would be available to meet and give them a quick 10-minute briefing or so, and then staff can take them on a tour. That's Thursday, the 25th at 4 p.m.
So I did this last year, and it was really a lot of fun just to get their input on their local government compared to ours. So if nobody has the time, I could do it, unless somebody wants to speak up.
I will if staff wants to babysit my kids. But I think it might be better for you to do it, James. I love giving tours here, though. James?
So either myself or Aaron. I'll let you know.
I'll be your second team.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay, and then the other one, anything else? Sorry.
I was going to say that I'd be happy to do it. I'm busy that day otherwise.
Okay, and then the other thing is that we are always looking for ways to streamline, and we've worked for a long time with planning on, their staff reports and our staff reports, and, try to keep coordinated. We are now at a point where the planning division has really gotten their reports in good summary format and that type of a thing. And so we wanted to ask permission to just do a little test with them where we occasionally will put the smaller issues on your agenda with their 4 key points or 5 key points, however many they have on each issue, brought up to the front, and then not do a council staff report, at least for the first briefing. And then if the council has a lot of questions or something like that, we can do that. We wanted to try that with a couple of items, see what you think, and go from there. It's not essential that we do it that way, but we wanted to try it out because it looks like it's at a point where that might work well. Would that be okay to try it?
I'm good with it.
Aaron, sorry,
Yeah,
are you okay?
thumbs up.
Okay, all right, that's it, thank you.
That was a really nice, quick meeting, so I don't have a gavel, but here we go. Meeting is adjourned.